Transforming toxic people into love is not about changing others through force, argument, or emotional pressure. It begins with understanding a deeper truth about human behavior. People do not act from nowhere. Every harsh word, every cold reaction, every form of negativity is often a reflection of unresolved pain, confusion, or inner emptiness. When you see this clearly, your approach to people begins to shift from reaction to awareness. Most people try to fix toxicity by confronting it with equal or greater intensity. They believe that if someone is angry, they must be answered with stronger anger. If someone is disrespectful, they must be put down. If someone is toxic, they must be defeated, but this approach rarely transforms anything, it only strengthens resistance. When a person feels attacked, they rarely open their heart. Instead, they close it even tighter and defend the very behavior you are trying to change. Real transformation does not come from pressure, it comes from perception. When you change how you see a person, you change how you respond to them. And when your response changes, the entire dynamic begins to shift. This does not mean accepting harm or allowing disrespect without boundaries. It means responding from clarity instead of emotional chaos. A toxic person often expects reaction. They are used to environments where conflict is normal. Their behavior is shaped by cycles of emotional instability. When they encounter anger, they know how to continue the cycle. But when they encounter calmness, patience, and emotional stability, something unfamiliar happens. The pattern is interrupted. For a moment, their usual script does not work. This interruption is powerful, not because it immediately changes them, but because it creates space. And change only begins in space, not in chaos. When your presence does not escalate the situation, it forces a pause. In that pause, reflection becomes possible. In that pause, awareness can slowly enter. Love in this sense is not emotional attachment or tolerance of harmful behavior. It is a grounded form of compassion combined with wisdom. It is the ability to see a person beyond their current behavior. It is understanding that someone who is acting from pain is not fully aware of the damage they are causing. This understanding does not excuse actions, but it prevents your own energy from becoming poisoned by hatred. When you stop feeding toxicity with emotional reaction, you stop giving it strength. You remain stable while others fluctuate. This stability itself becomes a mirror. Some people will slowly begin to soften in your presence because they are no longer receiving the fuel they are used to. Others may not change at all, but your peace will remain untouched. The most powerful transformation happens when you no longer try to control others at all. Instead, you focus on mastering your own emotional state. You speak when necessary, you remain silent when wisdom demands it, and you walk away when boundaries are crossed. In all these actions, there is no hatred stored inside. Many toxic behaviors survive because they are constantly engaged. When engagement stops, their influence weakens. When emotional dependency ends, clarity begins. And when clarity begins, the possibility of change slowly emerges. Turning toxic people into love is not about fixing them. It is about becoming so stable in your own awareness that your presence no longer participates in cycles of harm. Some people will naturally evolve in that space, not because you force them, but because they finally encountered a different way of being that does not mirror their own chaos. Most people believe the answer to toxic behavior is resistance. When someone becomes rude, controlling, manipulative, or aggressive, the natural reaction is to fight back immediately. The mind wants revenge. The ego wants victory. The emotions want to prove something. But this reaction often creates a cycle that becomes even more destructive. Toxicity grows stronger when it is constantly fed with emotional reactions. Anger meeting anger only creates a larger fire. A toxic person usually carries chaos within themselves. Their words, behavior, and actions are often reflections of inner conflict. Someone who is deeply peaceful does not spend their energy humiliating others, spreading negativity, or trying to hurt people emotionally. Pain that is not healed inside eventually spreads outside. This is why many toxic people are constantly searching for reactions. They unconsciously want others to feel the same frustration and disturbance that they carry within themselves every day. The moment you react emotionally without awareness, you lose control over yourself. Your peace disappears. Your thoughts become clouded. Your energy becomes heavy. Instead of remaining centered, you become part of the conflict itself. Many people think winning an argument means raising their voice louder, speaking harsher words, or emotionally overpowering another person. But true strength is the ability to remain calm when someone else is trying to disturb your inner state. Silence can sometimes be more powerful than endless explanations. Calmness can become stronger than aggression. A person who has mastered themselves understands that not every insult deserves a response, and not every negative person deserves access to their emotion. This does not mean becoming weak or passive. It means choosing awareness over impulsive reactions. When someone speaks with anger and you answer with patience, the entire energy changes. Toxic people often expect resistance because resistance is familiar to them. They are used to conflict, emotional chaos, and tension. But when they encounter someone who remains composed, they often do not know how to continue their pattern. Your calmness interrupts the emotional cycle they are accustomed to creating. Many people destroy their own peace trying to change others. They spend years arguing, proving, defending, and fighting emotionally exhausting battles. But transformation rarely happens through force. Human beings change more through understanding, presence, and emotional maturity than through humiliation or aggression. When a person feels constantly attacked, they usually become more defensive, more closed, and more toxic. There is also wisdom in understanding boundaries. Choosing not to fight toxicity does not mean allowing disrespect or abuse. It means refusing to let another person's negativity control your mind and emotions. You can walk away peacefully. You can protect your space without hatred. You can say no without anger. Emotional balance is not weakness, it is discipline. A person who constantly reacts to everything becomes emotionally exhausted because their inner state depends entirely on other people's behavior. But a person who develops awareness begins to understand that peace is an internal decision. They stop giving every negative voice the power to disturb their heart. They stop allowing toxic behavior to pull them into emotional darkness. Instead of becoming another angry person in an already angry world, they learn how to remain steady, observant, and emotionally free. Your energy is the first language people understand, even before words are spoken. Long before you explain your boundaries, your mind, or your emotions, people already form an impression based on your presence. The way you carry yourself silently communicates how you expect to be treated. If your energy is scattered, uncertain, and easily influenced, people will unconsciously test your limits. If your energy is grounded, calm, and self-respecting, people naturally adjust their behavior around you. Human interaction is not only based on what is said, but also on what is felt. When you enter a room, your emotional state radiates through your posture, your tone, your eye contact, and even your silence. People pick up on these subtle signals and respond accordingly. This is why two people can say the same words, but receive completely different reactions. It is not only the message that matters, but the energy behind it. When someone allows disrespect repeatedly without any inner resistance, they teach others that their boundaries are flexible, not because they say so, but because their energy shows no consequence. Over time, people unconsciously adapt to that pattern. They may push further, speak more harshly, or take more space than they should, not always out of intention to harm, but because the energetic boundary was never clearly established. On the other hand, a person who carries calm confidence communicates self-worth without needing constant validation. They do not chase approval, nor do they over-explain themselves to be understood. Their presence alone carries a sense of stability. In such energy, people naturally become more mindful of their behavior, not out of fear, but out of respect for the grounded presence in front of them. Energy is shaped by internal alignment. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are consistent, your presence becomes clear and steady. When there is inner conflict, confusion reflects outwardly. People sense hesitation, insecurity, or emotional instability, even when it is not spoken. This is why self-awareness becomes so important. The more you understand your internal state, the more control you have over the energy you project into the world. Many people try to change how others treat them without changing their own internal energy. They demand respect while internally doubting their worth. They ask for kindness while carrying frustration and emotional imbalance, but the outside world often mirrors the inside state. When your inner world changes, your outer experiences begin to shift as well. Setting boundaries is not only about words, it is about embodiment. You can say no 100 times, but if your energy still carries fear of rejection, people may not fully respect that boundary. However, when your energy is aligned with self-respect, even a simple calm response becomes powerful enough to define limits clearly. There is no need for aggression or over-explanation. Clarity becomes enough. People also mirror emotional consistency. If someone experiences unpredictability in your behavior, they will adjust by becoming cautious or distant. But when your energy remains stable, others feel safe around you. Stability creates trust. Trust influences behavior more than control ever can. Your energy also determines the kind of relationships you attract and sustain. When you operate from self-respect, you naturally move away from environments that drain you. When you operate from insecurity, you may tolerate situations that slowly diminish your peace. Over time, your energetic standards shape your entire social reality. Even silence carries energy. When you remain silent in the face of disrespect, that silence can either represent fear or conscious strength. The difference lies in your inner state. If silence comes from awareness, it communicates control. If it comes from suppression, it communicates weakness. People feel that difference without needing explanation. Every interaction becomes a reflection of what you consistently project, not what you occasionally pretend, but what you continuously embody. Your energy sets the tone before your words ever begin to speak. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness, avoidance, or surrender. In a world driven by reaction and noise, people believe that responding quickly and forcefully is the only way to protect themselves. But silence carries a depth that anger can never reach. Anger burns energy outward, often destroying clarity in the process. Silence turns that same energy inward, creating space for awareness, understanding, and emotional control. When a person is hurt, the immediate impulse is to react. Words come rushing out, emotions take control, and the situation escalates. In that moment, anger feels powerful, but it is usually uncontrolled power. It is energy without direction. It may express pain, but it rarely solves it. Instead, it often multiplies misunderstanding and deepens emotional wounds on both sides. What begins as a small conflict can quickly turn into a lasting emotional distance. Silence interrupts that cycle. It creates a gap between emotion and reaction. In that gap, awareness begins to grow. Instead of being driven by impulse, a person begins to observe their own state. They start to notice what they feel rather than immediately acting on it. This observation is where healing begins. Silence does not suppress emotion. It allows emotion to settle so it can be understood rather than expressed destructively. Many conflicts survive only because both sides keep feeding them with words. Every reaction becomes fuel. Every argument becomes another layer of misunderstanding. But when one person chooses silence, the pattern breaks. The emotional fire has nothing to feed on. In that absence, intensity slowly dissolves. What once felt urgent begins to lose its power. Silence also protects dignity. When emotions are high, words are often spoken that are later regretted. Once spoken, they cannot be taken back. They remain in memory, shaping how people perceive each other long after the moment has passed. Silence prevents unnecessary damage. It allows time for emotions to cool and for perspective to return. In that space, wiser responses become possible. There is also strength in not reacting to everything. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every insult requires engagement. When a person feels the need to respond to every provocation, they become emotionally dependent on external triggers. Silence breaks that dependency. It restores control over attention and energy. Instead of being pulled into every emotional wave, a person learns to remain steady like deep water beneath surface turbulence. Silence does not mean acceptance of disrespect. It does not mean ignoring boundaries or allowing harm to continue. It means choosing awareness over impulsive reaction. It means understanding that responding from anger often weakens clarity, while responding from calm awareness strengthens it. Sometimes silence is temporary, creating space before a thoughtful response. Sometimes it is final, representing a conscious decision not to engage in destructive energy. Within silence, understanding grows. A person begins to see not only the actions of others, but also the reasons behind them. Many behaviors that seem offensive on the surface are rooted in personal pain, insecurity, or confusion. Anger reacts only to the surface. Silence allows perception to go deeper. It creates room for empathy without losing self-respect. Silence also heals the one who chooses it. Constant emotional reaction keeps the mind restless and unstable. It drains mental energy and leaves a person exhausted. Silence restores that energy. It brings the mind back to a more natural rhythm, where thoughts are not constantly pulled into conflict. In that stillness, emotional balance slowly returns. Even in personal growth, silence becomes a teacher. It reveals patterns of thought that are usually hidden in noise. It allows self-reflection without distraction. In silence, a person begins to understand their triggers, their wounds, and their habits more clearly. This understanding is essential for true emotional maturity. Anger may demand expression, but silence offers transformation. One creates noise that fades quickly. The other creates awareness that remains long after the moment has passed. Compassion is often misunderstood in a world that values dominance, control, and emotional hardness. Many people are taught that being strong means being unbothered, detached, or even emotionally cold. They believe that protecting themselves requires shutting down their sensitivity, but real strength is not the absence of feeling. Real strength is the ability to feel deeply without being destroyed by what you feel. Compassion is the capacity to understand another person's pain without losing yourself in it. It is the ability to see beyond behavior and recognize the human experience underneath it. When someone acts with anger, cruelty, or negativity, it is easy to respond with the same energy. That reaction feels powerful in the moment, but it often comes from a place of emotional instability. Compassion, on the other hand, requires grounding. It requires awareness strong enough to remain steady even when faced with discomfort. A compassionate person does not immediately label others as enemies. They observe. They understand that every action has a history behind it. People are shaped by their experiences, their wounds, their environment, and their internal struggles. When someone is hurting, they often express that pain outwardly in ways that are confusing or even harmful. Compassion does not excuse harmful behavior, but it recognizes that behavior is often a symptom, not the root. True strength is visible when a person chooses not to react impulsively to negativity. Instead of escalating conflict, they pause. That pause is not weakness. It is mastery over instinct. It is the ability to hold space between emotion and action. In that space, transformation becomes possible. Without that space, reaction dominates and cycles of harm continue endlessly. Compassion also requires courage. It is easy to be hard toward others. It is easy to shut down emotionally and build walls. What is difficult is staying open in a world that sometimes feels harsh. Staying open does not mean allowing yourself to be mistreated. It means maintaining clarity while still seeing humanity in others. It means recognizing that someone can be wrong without being worthless. When a person develops compassion, their perception of conflict changes. Instead of seeing every disagreement as a battle to win, they begin to see it as a moment to understand. Instead of trying to defeat others emotionally, they start to focus on maintaining inner balance. This shift reduces unnecessary suffering. Many conflicts grow not from the situation itself, but from the emotional reactions layered on top of it. Compassion also transforms the one who practices it. When you stop constantly resisting others internally, your own mind becomes lighter. There is less tension, less emotional noise, and less internal conflict. The mind becomes more spacious. In that spaciousness, clarity begins to grow naturally. You start responding instead of reacting. You start observing instead of judging instantly. Some people mistake compassion for passivity. They assume that being kind means allowing everything or accepting harm silently. But real compassion includes wisdom. It includes boundaries. It includes the understanding that protecting your peace is also an act of care. You can understand someone's pain without absorbing their chaos. You can see their struggle without becoming part of it. Compassion is not something that makes you smaller. It expands your awareness. It allows you to see life from multiple perspectives instead of a narrow emotional reaction. When you understand more, you suffer less from misunderstanding. When you respond with awareness instead of impulse, your actions carry more precision and less regret. Even in moments of intense emotional pressure, compassion offers an anchor. It reminds you that every human being, including yourself, is in a process of learning and evolving. Mistakes are part of that process. So are misunderstandings, emotional outbursts, and internal conflicts that people may not even fully understand within themselves. A compassionate mind does not rush to destroy what it does not understand. It stays present long enough to see deeper layers. It holds space for complexity instead of demanding simplicity. It allows time for emotions to settle before forming conclusions. In that patience, a different kind of power emerges, one that is quiet, stable, and deeply rooted in awareness that continues to unfold. Hatred has never been a tool for transformation. It can force, it can pressure, it can even intimidate, but it cannot change the heart of another person in a meaningful or lasting way. When a person is met with hatred, their natural response is resistance. The mind becomes defensive, the ego strengthens its position, and instead of reflection, there is reaction. What begins as an attempt to correct behavior often becomes a deeper divide between two human beings who no longer understand each other. Human behavior is shaped through emotional experience, not emotional destruction. When someone feels attacked, judged, or devalued, they do not become open to change. They become more attached to their existing identity, even if that identity is flawed or harmful. This is because the mind associates survival with self-protection. Hatred signals danger, and in response to danger, the inner system closes. In that closed state, learning becomes almost impossible. Many people believe that strong emotional force can break another person's habits or beliefs, but force only reshapes behavior temporarily. It does not transform understanding. A person may act differently under pressure, but once the pressure is removed, they often return to their original patterns. This is because the root of change was never addressed. Real change requires awareness, not fear. When hatred is used as a method of influence, it creates a cycle. One person expresses anger, the other responds with equal or greater anger, and the distance between them increases. Over time, communication becomes distorted. Words lose meaning and are replaced by emotional reactions. Instead of listening, both sides prepare responses. Instead of understanding, both sides defend themselves. In such an environment, growth becomes impossible. There is also a hidden effect of hatred on the one who uses it. When a person constantly operates from a place of anger toward others, their own inner state becomes unstable. The mind remains in a state of tension, always scanning for conflict, always expecting resistance. This constant emotional strain affects clarity, patience, and decision-making. Over time, the person trying to change others through hatred becomes trapped in their own emotional noise. Understanding does not arise from destruction. It arises from awareness. When someone feels genuinely seen, not judged, they become more open to reflection. When a person feels heard, not attacked, they become more willing to examine themselves. Change begins in spaces where safety exists, not in spaces where fear dominates. This does not mean accepting harmful behavior without boundaries, but it does mean choosing responses that do not deepen division unnecessarily. Even in difficult relationships, the approach used determines the outcome. A calm conversation can open doors that anger permanently closes. A patient silence can sometimes reveal more than aggressive confrontation. When emotions are not escalated, there is room for reflection. In that space, a person can begin to question their own behavior without feeling threatened. Hatred focuses on punishment, but transformation requires insight. Punishment may create momentary compliance, but insight creates lasting change. A person who understands why their behavior is harmful is far more likely to evolve than a person who is simply afraid of consequences. Fear fades, but understanding remains. People often mirror the energy they receive. When met with hostility, they mirror hostility. When met with calmness, they often begin to adjust their own emotional intensity. This does not guarantee immediate change, but it creates an environment where change becomes possible. Emotional tone shapes interaction more than words alone. Choosing not to use hatred does not mean ignoring reality or avoiding difficult truths. It means delivering truth in a way that does not destroy the possibility of growth. It means recognizing that change is a process that unfolds through awareness, patience, and emotional intelligence rather than forceful domination of another mind. Peace is not something that happens when life becomes easy. It is something that is cultivated until external conditions lose the ability to control your inner world. When a person becomes deeply peaceful, they stop being easily disturbed by the behavior of others. Toxicity may still exist around them, but it no longer finds a place to settle inside their mind. It passes through like noise that is heard but not absorbed. Most people live in reaction. Their emotional state rises and falls based on what others say, what others do, and how others behave toward them. This creates a fragile inner world. In such a state, even small negativity can feel overwhelming. A single harsh word can change the entire mood of the day. This is not because the word is powerful, but because the mind has not learned how to remain stable in the presence of disturbance. Becoming peaceful is not about avoiding people or situations. It is about strengthening awareness to such a degree that external energy no longer dictates internal balance. When peace becomes stable within, toxic behavior from others starts to lose its grip. The same words that once created emotional storms now feel lighter. The same situations that once caused anxiety now feel manageable. Toxicity often depends on reaction to survive. It feeds on emotional engagement. When a person reacts with anger, fear, or frustration, they unknowingly give energy to that cycle. But when there is no emotional feeding, the cycle weakens. A peaceful presence does not respond from impulse. It responds from awareness or sometimes chooses no response at all. In that absence of reaction, toxic patterns begin to lose intensity. Inner peace is built through observation of the mind. Instead of being controlled by every passing thought or emotion, a peaceful person learns to witness them. Thoughts arise, emotions appear, but they are not immediately acted upon. This space between feeling and reaction is where strength develops. In that space, choices become conscious rather than automatic. When peace becomes stronger than disturbance, the external world begins to feel less threatening. Criticism no longer defines self-worth. Judgment no longer shapes identity. Conflict no longer pulls the mind into chaos. There is a sense of stability that remains even when circumstances are unstable. This does not mean being unaffected, but being unshaken. Many people try to eliminate toxicity by changing others. They argue, explain, fight, and attempt to correct behavior through force. But the more attention is given to toxic behavior, the more power it seems to gain. Peace works in a different way. It does not engage unnecessarily. It does not amplify what is already unstable. Instead, it reduces its own reaction until the external influence no longer finds resistance or fuel. A peaceful person does not carry the need to prove themselves in every situation. They are not driven by egoic validation. This reduces unnecessary emotional conflict. Without constant internal tension, external tension becomes easier to handle. Even when surrounded by negativity, the inner state remains grounded. Boundaries still exist in peace. Silence is not submission. Calmness is not acceptance of harm. A peaceful mind can walk away, say no, or distance itself without hatred. The difference is that these actions are not driven by emotional chaos, but by clarity. Decisions are made from awareness rather than reaction. As inner peace deepens, perception itself changes. Instead of seeing every toxic behavior as a personal attack, it is seen as a reflection of another person's internal condition. This shift reduces emotional weight. What once felt personal begins to feel impersonal. What once created suffering begins to lose significance in the mind. Eventually, peace becomes a kind of protection, not because the world changes, but because the mind no longer interprets everything as a threat. Toxicity may still exist externally, but it fails to enter internally. It loses its ability to disturb what is no longer available to be disturbed.